Not to slap you silly.
This is Tim Urban, and even if you don't recognize him at first, you surely have come across his content if you're a digital native. His most famous work is probably this pitch-perfect article on his blog waitbutwhy.com, which deals with the reasons for and the consequences of procrastination. Tim visualizes this concept in a minimalistic yet beautiful manner, and presented the content of this article in a highly popular TED Talk.
Here's the brain of a non-procrastinator. Here's my brain. So the rational decision maker will make the rational decision to do something productive, but the monkey doesn't like that plan. So he actually takes the wheel and he says, actually, let's read the entire Wikipedia page of the Nancy Kerrigan-Tanya Harding scandal because I just remembered that happened. Then we're gonna go over to the fridge, we're gonna see if there's anything new in there since 10 minutes ago.
This video currently sits at nearly 50 million clicks on YouTube, and rightfully so. It appeared at a time when procrastination wasn't an overinflated buzzword and self-help not just a lucrative YouTube niche full of toxicity and delusion. Also, how can you not like this guy? His tired eyes combined with the self-deprecating humor sold me. Tim Urban is not just talented. He's an overall nice guy. And even though I stopped reading his blog because it became too sciencey for my taste, I found myself often revisiting the TED Talk and kept a fond memory of him. Until I woke up on a beautiful morning in 2022, opened Twitter and saw this. I think what's good or bad should be an open and evolving discussion. So, who is smart enough to determine which ideas cross the too bad and harmful to be allowed in the market threshold? I certainly don't think I am. In utter despair, I was facing the fact that one of my favorite internet personalities might have become something truly, truly terrible. Could it be true? Could he? Yes, my dear friends and followers, Tim Urban is a centrist. What is a centrist, you ask? Well, Tim is certain that there are two equal sides in political debate. And if only, oh if only, everyone came together and had a rational discussion, there'd be no polarization anymore. Both sides would present their arguments and come to a sensible conclusion. Oh, sweet summer child. But I had not given up on Tim yet. I refused to believe that my boy would be as susceptible to stupid conspiratorial propaganda, a partisan grifter, or outright brain dead. No, Tim was no own-the-lips kind of guy. I figured he must have had his reasons to be as estranged from the left as from the right. Since he's going to publish a book about this exact polarization in October, I felt the urge to create this video. To understand Tim's motivations, we need to dive into the gist of his political theory and, well...
Right? The far left and far right aren't inherently bad. The far left is just kind of radical and questioning everything, and they're experimental. And the far right is just questioning, maybe we messed up, maybe we should go back to the way things were. I mean,
we're off to a great start here, guys. Tim illustrates the political spectrum to distinguish left from right, but he adds another axis.
I call it the ladder. The ladder is a how you think axis. There's some nuance to it. It's a spectrum, but for our purposes, let's just focus on the two kind of core ideas here. There's high-rung political thinking and high-rung politics and low-rung politics.
So what is going on in the high rung? And how does it unify left and right?
High-rung politics is all about truth. They're on the same team. They're two sides of a truth kind of discovery machine.
In the corresponding article, Tim expands on this point. The two high-rung thinkers share a common way of thinking. If there's clarity around a certain set of facts, high-rung thinkers will usually agree with each other. They are macro-united because they share a common notion of reality. Their opinions will differ wildly, but they usually agree on facts or the lack thereof. Yeah, but do they? Only in the GOP you find congresswomen who posted about QAnon and its subsets of conspiracy theories. Only in the GOP the majority of primary winners think the election was stolen. Also, it's conservative politicians who deny the safety of the COVID shots and don't take climate change seriously.
It'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Hey, well, I don't think science knows, actually.
So, is it really an agreement on facts? You could argue that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump do not represent the high rung of right-wing politics, that they are mere outliers sticking out like a sore thumb. And yeah, they are brain-dead idiots, of course, but politically they are on the top of the pile. Greene sits in Congress even though she posted about Jewish space lasers and harassed the parents of Sandy Hook victims. Donald Trump was president despite being the driving force behind the racist birther conspiracy that targeted Obama. In contrast, the prominent radical Democrats are AOC and Bernie. And even though it's kind of weird that in the US universal healthcare, gun restrictions and aggressive action against climate change are somehow far left, I mean, yeah, you could argue against their positions and their policies, but their perception of reality and facts is never ever in question. It would be ridiculous to equate them to the paranoid conspiratorial delusion prevalent in huge parts of the GOP. Now, Tim could of course say that by high-rung right-wing politics he does not refer to the entire GOP. Yeah, well, I'm not denying there are others. I mean, Mike Pence certified the election and Liz Cheney openly denounced Trump. But those are minority positions. They're wholly irrelevant. Accordingly, the Capitol rioters screamed "Hang Mike Pence," and the GOP tried to ostracize Cheney. The GOP of 2022 is a MAGA cult. So to summarize, in contrast to Tim's model, reality does not look like this, but more like this. But there's a second factor, according to Tim, which unites both sides. And that is his impression that as fierce as the debates between the high-rung giants can be, they know deep down that what they are really doing is working together to navigate their way up the mountain towards a more perfect nation. So apparently both share the same values. So what exactly does that mean? Tim thinks that left and right are macro-united because they get how democracy works. Well, let's see. For the GOP, you can find an extensive Wikipedia article with all the state laws and state bills that make it difficult for poorer African American people, etc. to vote. And for fairness' sake, let's check the okay. Well, Wikipedia seems to be part of the radical left as well. Tim further claims that church and state should be separated in a perfect nation. And I don't want to go full edgy atheist on you, but he's got a point there. It's especially fundamentalists who are known to reject LGBTQ people. In a Pew Research poll, conservatives were asked about their attitude. Only 22% of evangelical Protestants think homosexuality should be accepted. And since we all know that the Bible Belt is as red as it gets, these views will be reflected in Congress and the Senate, the highest rungs of political discussion. To make matters even worse, the current Supreme Court can be described as the most pro-religion it's been since at least the 1950s. And this begs the question, does the Supreme Court itself even represent the will of the people? They overturned Roe v. Wade even though a majority of the country is pro-abortion. Also, the voter has no influence in who becomes the next Supreme Court judge. Of course, you could argue that the stupid rule to replace judges based on their death or retirement is fair, because the president to do so could be either Democrat or Republican. But we all know that only one of the parties was hypocritical enough to manipulate the constellation. Hell, even Tim knows about it.
You see McConnell in the Senate not putting through a Senate candidate, a Supreme Court candidate because it's the last year. Totally unprecedented. That's not the rule. And then 4 years later, they go and they put their own candidate through. This is low-rung shit.
Yes, Tim, but this low-rung shit is the highest court that might turn the state into a Christian fundamentalist theocracy which will rule on for decades.
Of course, Trump with the election, I mean, Reagan's big thing was, the peaceful transition of power is what makes us special. And, Trump, of course, is the exact opposite.
Yes, Tim, but the exact opposite was president for 4 years and might become president again. I could continue endlessly, Don't say gay bills, fear-mongering in the media landscape, a probable ban on contraceptives and homosexual intercourse marriage in red states, or above all, giving states the chance to announce election results independent of the actual voting numbers. No, Tim, the right does not strive for the values you consider important. Your image of a reasonable Republican, one that protects the country against damage and deterioration, is an illusion. At least where it really matters. Taking all the examples I've just mentioned into account, this must be the updated graph. But what about them, you could ask? Maybe Tim has some examples to convince us about the madness of the left. Well, let's see. On the one hand, Tim says that the left is just as intolerant and similarly biased towards the right as vice versa. Well, yes, we all know that. There are famous books about it, yada yada. As pointed out, however, the intolerance and the discrimination of minorities for religious or other ideological reasons is only found on the right. On the other hand, I bet nobody would disagree about the fact that some horrible, inadequate Democrats have very high positions in today's government.
And a woman myself, and the daughter of a woman, and a granddaughter of a woman. And,
Yes, they are corrupt and oblivious as fuck. Everyone is aware of that, Tim. But democracy is not in danger because Nancy Pelosi is a greedy witch. When Tim complained that the small far-left fringe group forced the whole left to make policies on their demand, Majority Report's Matt Binder asked him to name a single policy. And Tim did not answer. Still, it would not be correct to leave the graph like this, so let's tweak it a little bit. When complaining about the left's insanity, Tim and everyone else is restrained to selectively picking news stories or Twitter posts to justify his outrage.
We see James Bennett, the editor of the New York Times op-ed section, getting fired because he published an op-ed by Tom Cotton that 62% of the country agreed with, but it didn't jibe with woke orthodoxy.
Here he's talking about this 2020 article called "Send in the Troops." The text basically asks Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act and deploy the military against riots by BLM protesters. It goes without saying that considering the heated climate in 2020, considering the upcoming election, George Floyd's death and COVID-19, you need to be sensitive publishing material like this. To add to that, the article includes unfounded partisan claims about the role of cadres of left-wing radicals like Antifa. Bennett was in charge of checking the op-ed before release, but it turned out he didn't. His team even added an incendiary headline. All in all, the article doesn't meet the standards of the New York Times and reads more like campaign propaganda. By the way, Tim's claim about 62% of Americans supporting this article is not true. Maybe he's talking about this Gallup poll referred to in the article, according to which a majority of people supported calling in the National Guard to supplement city police forces. And yes, they are in favor of that. But supplementing the police evokes a very different image than sending in the troops. They did not agree with the article itself. You want another example for woke cancel culture?
You see Denise Young at Apple, a black woman who's the head of diversity, who says, to me, diversity is not, it's more complicated than just about something like race. When I look at 12 blue-eyed, blonde-haired guys, I see diversity. I see different people, diverse in different ways. She was fired for saying that.
He's correct. Denise Young left Apple after making these comments about diversity. However, Young Smith had been talking to Apple CEO Tim Cook about the next phase of her career and life since about a year ago, according to a source. Over the last few months, Apple has been searching for a successor to replace Young Smith. It's not quite clear, however, when exactly Young Smith decided she would leave Apple. But based on that timeline, it seems as though Young Smith made up her mind before those comments in Bogota, Colombia, for which she later apologized. Since then, she's been working successfully as an executive at Cornell Tech. So I'm not sure she feels the pitchforks in her ass. Also, Tim, she wasn't fired. And all of that happened in 2017, nearly 5 years ago. And you see, these two examples are basically Tim Urban in a nutshell. On Twitter, he complains that kids are bored during Joe Biden's speech. that Aladdin starts with a disclaimer on Disney+, or that progressive activists are banning To Kill a Mockingbird from many schools, etc. Especially that last tweet is so full of paranoia, false information and hypocrisy that I could do an entire video about it. And right now I'm not even mentioning all the right-wing dog whistling that's permeating his profile. In some regards, I'm even with him. I also think it's stupid to start Aladdin with a disclaimer. But once again, these are no issues that discriminate, hurt or disenfranchise people. That happens on the right. This is where the problem lies. Tim knows so as well, so he has resolved to cherry-picking some headlines to justify his outrage about the left. But he fails miserably. Going by his definition of wokeness and some of the talking points, I think I have a rather good idea about his biggest role model.
By a lot of metrics, racism is becoming less and less of a problem. You've got, maybe climate change, if it is the existential threat that many people think it is. I mean, right now people are being trained, little kids, college students, being trained to think the exact opposite way, to think that there's no such thing as objective truth.
I think wokeness is two things. It's a far left ideology, and it is far left. It's postmodern, and it's Marxist. Postmodern, and it's Marxist.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Tim Urban is no centrist. Just as any other culture warrior, he uses the term as a code word to hide his political and tribal sympathies for all the rational skeptics who almost exclusively push conservative talking points. This is what's so sad about him. He might be a good communicator when it comes to scientific concepts, but in terms of politics, his expertise just remains on a level with Dave Rubin. It's politics for fools. When his book releases, it will at best contribute to political stagnation, but at worst fearmonger people into voting for the GOP. And even if I granted that wokeness can be annoying and distracting, it's important to oppose the anti-democratic party as fiercely as possible. Let me finish with an article from Tim, which was not released on his blog Wait But Why, but on NewYorkTimes.com. You know, the outlet that advances a woke agenda according to him. It features an illustration of life paths and reminds us that from now on, from this very second, we have the chance to change. We can take our life into a different direction, regardless of the mistakes from the past. And as I see it, there are two paths for Tim. In the first one, he will use his connections with Elon Musk and Lex Fridman to market his book on heterodox podcasts by Chris Williamson, Barry Weiss, or eventually even Jordan Peterson. Because of that, more and more criticism will come in, and his former fanbase will emancipate. Tim will get angry that everyone is cancelling him and that free speech is restricted nowadays. After he gains traction, he will be invited on JRE, where Rogan and Tim circle jerk themselves into oblivion about the radical left. In 2023, Tim will proudly declare that he has no other chance at this point than to vote Republican. In the second path, Tim realizes that his attitude was misguided and contradictory. He issues corrections or deletes the article and even second guesses if he should release his book. Tim admits to have been lured into the anti-SJW hole, as many of us have, and will now dig his way out. Maybe even stay clear of politics altogether. In the end, he will be the lovable Tim Urban again, who encourages us to read more, teaches us about artificial intelligence, or makes us rethink our priorities in life. I know which path will make him more happy. I hope he does too.